Our galaxy is a medium-sized galaxy. It has within it hundreds of billions of stars and an innumerable number of planets. Our galaxy is but one galaxy of hundreds of billions of galaxies. Now, every time I say this, I blow my own mind. My own words come back and hit me upside the head. How dare we rebel or disobey Yahweh? He created all that. Let's try to get some understanding and some perspective of who it is that created us. That's deep. That's deep. Here's what's deeper. We were made in his image and likeness. Image and likeness. That means that Yahweh looks like us. He has a face, a head, arms, legs like we do. A spiritual body like his resurrected son. That person, for lack of a better descriptive, created the heavens. Smart? Doesn't even begin to, there's not a word. We don't have a word in any language. There's not a word in the Hebrew language to describe the brain power. Then we look at the descriptives, the characteristics that Scripture tells us that he has allowed to be revealed about himself so that we can get to know him. And the one that doesn't get talked about nearly enough is that Yahweh is without error. Yahweh is perfect. We've never experienced anything in this earthly realm that is perfect. We have no concept of perfection, and we have no concept of perfection on this powerful and large of a scale. Now do you see why you don't make lackadaisical oaths to a being that is this powerful and serious? Everything is serious to this being. We need to understand that. We go lackadaisical about our lives. Oh, I'll be saved like everybody else. I'm not a murderer. I'm not a killer. And Yahweh's standards are so much higher than that. We have no shot on our own merits. We have no shot. Yet, the dichotomy is that we have requirements of obedience. The law of Yahweh, the keeping of the law of Yahweh in our daily lives is the one job that we are absolutely mandatorily compelled to do if we want any shot at salvation. And yet it is the one job for which we get zero credit. See, the way salvation works is that we're converted. We have a change of heart. We have that experience. We finally suffered enough to give up so that we can gain. That's why when we don't want anything bad to happen, we're actually fighting against Yahweh. Because none of us learn until life beats us up enough to go, wait a minute, I can't do this in my own strength. I cannot do this in my own strength. What have I got to lose? I might as well give Yeshua a try. When you're finally at that point in your life, Yeshua comes to the door. He's no longer on the other side of the door, standing like a gentleman, knocking, asking for you to let him in. When you get to that point, that is your way of asking him in. And he comes in, and you have a personal experience with Yahweh that changes you. You are never the same again. But your journey, because salvation is a process, not an event, your journey has just begun. Passover, people, represents, it is the symbol for the beginning of that journey. Unleavened bread is the symbol for the spirit we must have to make it through that journey. This is why I say that out of the 7 annual holy days, Passover is the most important. And it is the reason for this lesson during this season. So we need to understand that Yahweh makes choices based on us. He tells us that we will be judged. And that, my friends, is the third of the gems that I want to hand to you today. The subject matter of judgment is even more important than the subject matter of eschatology. Not enough teaching and preaching on the subject matter of judgment. We are all to be judged, and it is the reality of that judgment that keeps us sober every day, to keep us on point. Without that teaching, which, by the way, is contained, you cannot teach eschatology without covering the subject of judgment, which is why eschatology is so important. But if you looked at things in detail, you would separate out judgment as a separate entity within itself and study. And judgment is the most important subject. So the most important scripture is 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. The most important book is the book of Numbers. And the most important subject, no, it's not salvation. The most important subject is the subject of judgment, which includes the subject of salvation. We are all to be judged. The scriptures say, let judgment begin at the house of Elohim first, then the Gentiles. This tells us the result of that judgment. Most of the people looked up to, most of the people preaching, most of the people leading the flock were in error. And they are found wanting, and they are found guilty. And their punishment is going to be very harsh. But notice the flock that follows them receives similar punishment, even to the little ones. So please, let's understand the nature of Yahweh, so that when he says something and you decide not to obey it but to ignore it and to pretend that somehow he's changed his mind. 13 times in Scripture, according to the concordance of the King James Bible, 13 times in Scripture he says specifically, he is no respecter of persons. That means that the concept of dispensationalism that Protestants like to rely upon is a false one. That means that Yahweh did not change his mind in how he treats people simply because we were, quote unquote, lucky enough to be born after the resurrection of Messiah, as opposed to before it. If he did that, that would make him a respecter of persons.